Darren Revitz, and you're listening to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series.
Today, we're very happy to have Dennis Kleinman. He's a voice actor from A World Voice. Thanks for joining us, Dennis.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Roy. It's an absolute pleasure.
Very cool. What do you love about audio description?
Well, I think the service that it provides sight-impaired people is just, I think it's unmeasurable. There's something about it that, fits somewhere between an audiobook and a radio play. And I've only done this for about 9 months, and I absolutely love the work. I find it very stimulating. And, aside from all the other work we as voice actors do as our business, knowing that we're doing something that is greater than that, there's more of a service that we're providing to people who need it so desperately. I think it just has a completely different construct as a result of that.
Can you talk a little bit about your other experiences in voiceover and how it might relate to audio description, or might be a little different?
Absolutely. I've been a professional voice actor for, I would say, about 10 years. I started off as like most people, a sort of sideline. And then about 2 years ago, I gave up my day job and I'm a full-time voice actor. And a lot of my work is actually in audiobooks. And what I really love about audio description and audiobooks is there is a crossover in that you're describing events. You're talking about things that are going on as opposed to doing a commercial or doing a video game or whatever. And so I think my audiobook experience really helped me segue into audio description in a very seamless way. I immediately, from the minute I started doing it, I felt that it was just, it works. It worked for me. And obviously in the response that I was getting from producers, they seem to really gravitate toward that. So I've just loved it.
Do you write your own scripts for audio description, or do you read off of a script similar to reading a book for audiobooks?
I read off a script. I've not done any of my own, but what I do, and I do preface my work with a lot of people, is I'm not shy to get involved. I will oftentimes make a suggestion. Why don't we say it this way? Why don't we say it that way? Can we be a little bit more concise? And so there's a lot of interaction between myself and the engineer as we're going through this. So I'm not shy to suggest changes.
That's great. And as you started talking about the service and now the business, can we address the art? You and I had briefly talked earlier about the art of audio description.
When I first got involved in this, the metaphor that I sort of adopted for myself is that for me, audio description is almost akin to a kind of David Attenborough type of narration, in that you're not front and center, you've stepped back and you're speaking, and you're not influencing what people are hearing, you're just providing the information, but you're doing it in a way that's not boring. If it's something that is sinister and there's tension in it, I bring a little bit of tension into my voice. I might lower my voice and just change the cadence slightly. But I'm very lucky that it seems to come very naturally for me. And at the same time, as we're doing the art and performing the art of it, knowing that you're performing a service at the same time, I just think it takes it to a different level.
Let's talk a little bit about this coming naturally. I had assumed that after 10 years of doing your voiceover work, whether it's audiobooks or otherwise, that a lot of those skills have overlapped into audio description. The way you speak about, not being front and center and stepping back, not influencing. I assume that comes from the focus on making sure that your audience is immersed in the story. Do you feel that immersion, if you agree with this, that when you step back, it's not that you're doing less of a performance, it's just a more nuanced performance. Does that sync up with you?
Absolutely. That's exactly how I view it. Is I'm not changing the performance of what people are experiencing. I'm hopefully enhancing it so that I'm providing a gap that would exist for someone who is sight impaired, or even people who I think want to have a different experience in looking at whatever show they're watching. I think there's almost an attraction to audio description for people who are not sight impaired, in that they are experiencing the artwork in a completely different way. People can get up and go and get a cup of coffee or something, know what's going on, and not feel that they're interrupting their experience of the show. So I think it has a multi-varied purpose, but obviously the main purpose is for people who can't see it. And I had an interesting experience the other day. I was checking on one of the recent projects that I just worked on, and so I sat down with my daughter and I said, "Let's just watch this, but let's close our eyes." And I did that, and it was actually, to coin a phrase, it was very eye-opening for me, in that I suddenly sort of understood and I could experience it on a completely different level, because I'd worked on this remotely, as a lot of us are doing these days. So I knew a little bit about what was going on. Obviously, I knew bits and pieces, but there were a lot of gaps that weren't there. But when I closed my eyes and I heard the interface of my voice with the dialogue, it just sort of, something went click. And it just gave me a further understanding of the benefit of it.
It sounds like that goes back to the comparison you said earlier about the audiobook and the radio play elements.
Right, exactly. And the radio play thing sort of struck a chord with me when I closed my eyes and I listened to this. And then it was a completely different experience. And I realized that, whether you're sight impaired or not, you can experience this genre of art in a different way by just listening.
Especially now that we're all staring at Zoom screens all the time and screens 90% of the time. We still want entertainment, but maybe, for those who are sighted, having that break and still enjoy the entertainment experience. This
Right.
seems like a pretty nice segue there. How do you feel about some challenges that you've faced in audio description that maybe you've been really proud of how you've overcome? Can you talk about anything that you're specifically proud of, whether it's recording remotely, whether it's working in audio description itself?
The challenges, quite frankly, that I've experienced is you have to be so sharp. You have to be on. There's not a minute that you can sort of relax, because you never know when the next piece is coming. And I think, just personally, what I get out of that is it's a bit of a brain exercise as well, doing this work, because I think it keeps you focused, it keeps you in the now, and there's just no room to deviate at all. I did get into a situation once. I was in the studio and we were doing it to picture, and I started getting involved in the show, and it's like, whoops, there comes the line, and so I think that's a trap you can fall into when you don't know the show and when you're starting to get involved in it. But I've done both ways, and I actually like either way. I mean, they both work, either doing it to picture or doing it just from a script. And I think it all depends on the engineer too. And I've been very blessed to work with some fabulous people, very supportive, very comforting. They make the environment very, very calm. And I think that's what one needs.
Very cool. Where would you love to see audio description headed if you could have any dream scenario?
I'd like to see audio description available on everything that's out there. Because as I said, I think that it's going to become a genre that is bigger than it even is today. As I mentioned previously, it's something that sighted people will appreciate as well in their way. It's obviously a completely different appreciation for people who are not sighted. But I think that it definitely is an art form that can find its own little niche.
Anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I just feel very blessed to have an opportunity to do this. As far as my involvement in audio description, obviously I have more of a global accent, and I'm hoping that with that as a foundation, that I can reach more people through my accent, which is a blend of British and South African. And I think, quite frankly, that sometimes my enunciation, I've always been told that my enunciation is very precise. And I think for audio description, that is a positive. So I'm hoping that it brings pleasant and a very comfortable experience to those people who are going through that my voice, has a calming aspect and does what it's supposed to do by not standing out too much, and fits that. There's a very narrow gap, I think, where audio description lies in terms of how you do it, the amount of rise and fall that you bring to the whole process. And as I said, it flows very easily for me, and I want to be able to give that back as much as possible.
Oh, that's great. And how wonderful that each voice talent brings their own take, and you have found your really specific niche as far as the projects that you've worked on and the way that you do deliver. It really distinguishes audio description in a way that that helps personalize it for not only the show or the audience, but also for you.
Right, absolutely. I think it's a very, very personal experience. And I think that if you don't have the fear is that it's going to be very dry and it's not going to have any emotional concept to it. And even though we know that the emotional concept has to be something that is not too varied, as I said a few minutes ago, there has to be that reality aspect. Otherwise, you could use an AI voice for it. And I think, we're all concerned about that, but you've got to bring something of yourself to the read, no matter what you do. And I think for audio description, I've found where I need to be. I almost can see it. It's like a space. It's about this big. And that's what I love about it is I feel I can slot in quite easily. It doesn't take me a lot of time to get there.
Some of the things that we've heard about the AI voice from our audiences is how useful it is for information. For example, if they're on their iPhone, the screen readers give valuable information. But it sounds like what you're addressing coincides with our audiences in the sense that when there's story elements, there are emotional nuance that you can bring. And, whether you're using the example of David Attenborough so clearly or other aspects, that there is that difference, that audio description can be this big, varied way of delivering content. And when it comes to story-based or emotional scenes that do need that extra immersive aspects, that's something that human voices can do.
Right. It makes it more engaging. I think that's the biggest difference. I think there's, as subtle as it is, and it might be minuscule in a sense, but it makes it more engaging, bringing that human element into it.
Dennis, how can people reach you, either on social media or otherwise?
I'm on all sorts of social media, but the best way to reach me is my website, which is aworldvoice.com. My telephone is 818-448-4790. It's my cell phone. It's how you reach me. But the best thing is go to the website because you'll also have an opportunity to just get a sense of, my work and examples of what I do.
Thanks so much for joining us, Dennis.
Thank you so much, Roy. It's been a pleasure.